Thank you. I've been around the globe a couple times in the last couple of years, working in Indonesia, South America, Kyrgyzstan. And wherever I go, I don't see any of the war on coal in any other country that exceeds that of the United States. How many in here thinks there's a war on coal? Raise your hand. When I go down through this punch list of orders and regulatory fiat actions on the part of the EPA, you're going to know for sure there is a war on coal, and you're going to know why your electric bill has gone up and will continue to climb terribly. Executive Order 12-898 was signed by Bill Clinton February the 11th of 1994. This created the whole notion of environmental justice. How many in here know what environmental justice is? Raise your hand. All right. I can tell you what the Wall Street Journal says that it is. It is the place where people unfamiliar with the term environmental justice is a sweet spot where the green movement meets the racial grievance industry. As the Essence interviewer that interviewed Lisa Perez Jackson, who's our former EPA director, and she has an alias, Richard Windsor. Who ever heard that name before, Richard Windsor? She was flying under the radar screen for 4 years as director of the US EPA to skirt FOIA requirements. And that's one of the reasons why she retired very abruptly, and you haven't heard much about her since. But she made a number of statements when she took office, and I'm quoting from her environmental justice stakeholder meeting in Bedford, Massachusetts on April the 15th. The inauguration of the first African-American president and my subsequent confirmation as the first African-American administrator of this agency has forever changed the face of environmentalism in this country. And ever since she took office, and I'll list these number of environmental actions that the EPA's taken without any legislation. You can remember House Bill 2454, passed in June of 2009, the cap and trade bill. It never made it through the Senate. It passed the House, and it wasn't really about the environment. It was really about the government taking control of our lives. I read every page of the 1,428-page bill, became a subject matter expert on it. But when you look back at what she's done and what Obama's done, all on the foundation of the notion of environmental justice, this all adds up and makes sense. She issued an endangerment finding. It was announced in April of 2009. It was issued December the 7th, 2009. December the 7th. What else happened on December the 7th? Exactly. A war against us was launched on December the 7th, and this is the day that the Obama administration chose to issue the endangerment ruling, which said greenhouse gas, what I'm exhaling right now, carbon dioxide is one of the 6 gases listed, okay? So they named it one of the dangerous gases. I'll tell you what they are. These greenhouse gases in the atmosphere constitute air pollution that threatens both public and health and welfare. And as such, on June the 2nd, well, I think it was June the 1st, they came out with a new set of proposed rules limiting the CO2 emissions from any new plant construction to 1,100 pounds per megawatt. And does anybody have any idea what coal emits when it's burned? It's 1,800. So there's no way you'll see any new coal-fired plants. And it doesn't matter the fact that she's saying, well, the current EPA director is saying, oh, well, you can put carbon capture and sequestration on. It's unproven technology. And one of the reasons why our country is so great, and we've eclipsed other nations around the world in 250 short years, think about it, China, Japan, Russia, has been in existence for thousands of years, all of a sudden comes to the United States, and we become the greatest economic power the world's ever known. And why is that? Cheap energy. And how much longer do you think we're going to keep that position in the world? Not very much longer. Obama's been taking apart the coal industry piece by piece in the last 5.5 years. So you had the endangerment finding. You had a memorandum of understanding signed June the 11th, 2009. What's that mean? Well, the EPA usurped the authority of the Army Corps of Engineers when it came to issuing permits for mining, and especially mountaintop mining. Clean Water Act 404 permits are what required to be able to open up a job and spoil the material on a surface job and then mine the coal. There were 80 permits pending that were suspended, or at least tabled, that weren't ever issued whenever that memorandum of understanding was signed. And really, the Corps of Engineers abdicated their role as the agency that managed that activity of permitting. Then we had the passage of House Bill 2454 on June the 26th. And even though Obama had the House and Senate in his hip pocket for 2 years, he could not get the support to get cap and trade to pass through the Senate and then put into law. But now he's doing it through regulatory fiat. That set of rules announced on June the 1st does the same thing. It just finishes killing off coal. On October the 15th of 2009, under the control of the EPA, the Corps of Engineers banned the issuance of nationwide 21 permits used to permit surface mines. And it was suspended for 2 years. And during that time, there was a number of surface mines in Appalachia that just did not get started because of the fact you couldn't get a permit. June 21st, 2010, the EPA issued proposed coal combustion residual rules to try to regulate coal ash as hazardous waste. Can you imagine taking all the ashes from all the power plants in the Midwest and putting them in hazardous waste landfills to the tune of $200 to $300 a ton? It is absolutely ridiculous, and your electric bill would quadruple if she was, and when I say she, Lisa Jackson was the one that threw these rules out, and she got beat back on these. The cross-state air pollution rule was passed in 2012, August the 21st, and what this did was, it's going to cost Ohio's electric utilities bills to go up higher than the rest of the country because they're saying that the states downwind of all of our power plants are causing them to be out of compliance with their state implementation plan. Yeah. So when you get some time, look up the cross-state air pollution rule, passed August 21st, 2012. New mercury and air toxic standards were passed on December the 21st, 2011. And now the utilities have to install additional pollution control measures. December 2010, they revoked the state of Texas's air permit authority and revoked their state implementation program and replaced it with a federal implementation program, primarily because there were a number of coal-fired power plants scheduled to be built in the state of Texas. And to this day, the state of Texas still does not have their program back. And to think about it, I mean, you think you're in the United States, it's more like you're over in Russia, and Putin's, instead of beating knots on taking the Crimea, they're taking your freedoms away. The revocation of Arch Coal Company's Spruce Creek mine Clean Water Act 404 permit January 13th. Arch has $250 million invested in this mine. And for the first time in the history of our country, a permit that had been in place for 2 years got revoked. So Arch has been litigating it ever since, and it's gone back and forth and back and forth. But who do you think's got more money, Arch Coal or the federal government? Isn't that something? They take money from businesses and then turn around and beat you over the head with them. They've been slow walking Clean Water Act 404 permit issuances ever since the Memorandum of Understanding between the EPA and the Corps of Engineers. And you say, well, why is that important to me? Well, if you're in business and you think, well, I got to get all these permits before I can do what I want to do, and then once I get my permit, I'm good, because I can go ahead and execute my business plan and take all the money that I've put at risk and go about my business, and then the next thing you know, it's revoked. I think that ought to be totally illegal for the government to revoke permits. And especially when they've been reviewed for 8 years. Before they submitted the permit, they did all kinds of environmental impact studies. And it's all leading up to the next point. The EPA put a limit of 5 parts per billion of selenium on surface mines in Appalachia. 5 parts per billion. Does anybody know what it is for bottled water? It's 50. So when you go buy Dasani or all this bottled water that's been processed, it can have 50 parts per billion, but your surface mine discharge pond has to be at 5. What do you think that costs to do that? And I'm going to tell you here in a minute what it costs to do it, because the EPA, and I'm going to go down through the list in order. March 24th, 2009. Made Patriot Coal sign a consent order, pay multi-million-dollar fine, and agree to install $200+ million worth of selenium treatment equipment on their surface mines. And they also had to agree to quit permitting big surface mines. Now, to me, if I'm a stockholder in Patriot or Arch or Alpha or Consol, how many people in here own stock in a coal company? 3 or 4 hands. What's happened to the price of the stocks in the last 5.5 years? You're right, they've been beat down primarily because of over-aggressive regulatory fiat. Arch Coal signed a consent agreement March the 1st, 2011, paid millions of dollars in fines and agreed to install $200 million worth of selenium treatment equipment. Consol signed one 2 weeks later, March 14th. Alpha Coal held out till March the 5th of 2014, paid a $27.5 million fine to the EPA and agreed to put in about $250 million worth of selenium treatment facilities. Now think about it. If you can drink 10 times that level of selenium in your bottled water, why can't a surface miner? How many people take vitamins that have selenium in them? If you take silver, you got some selenium in there. They've stepped up MSHA, that's the Mine Safety Health Administration, inspection frequency and jacked up the levels of the fines. And I've run a number of coal companies, worked in the industry for 45 years. I've never seen such a barrage of inspectors in my life. And we're talking about millions and millions of dollars worth of fines. And for things like, gee whiz, run out toilet paper inside the John, and the inspector comes up and writes you up for it. And you get fined hundreds of dollars for that. But they also rolled out new dust rules this year that has very little benefit, but a lot more cost to operations. And why is that important? Because your electric bill will be a function of the fuel supply. The fuel supply is a direct function of what it costs to mine the coal that fuels our power plants. In the state of Ohio, around 80% of our power comes from coal. Nationally, it's around 40%, on the way to 20% if Obama stays in office the rest of his term. And if someone like Hillary Clinton comes in, she's going to be a surrogate, and she's going to be a reflection of Obama. Years I've been paying taxes, and now there's a guy that's running an organization like the IRS. Do you have any confidence at all in what those idiots are doing in Washington? Well, I sure don't. But you got idiots like that running the EPA. And you got idiots like that if I were no better coal manager than this guy is manager of our country, I would have been canned and been out looking for a job. And that's what he needs to be doing. He needs to be canned.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Sure. Thank you. Go stand right there. So the action plan here is one thing you need to know. This man is correct. The other half of the equation, because when Tom Zalsowski, wherever Tom is, and Mike Lyons and Ron Feathers and one other went to see the AEP about the EPA, it became blindingly aware that these are Siamese twins from hell. And they do each other justice. And this man, meet him afterwards, find out the action plan that's necessary, because I guarantee you every one of our elected officials want to stay in office to manage this crisis, not to fix it, because where I live in Marietta, Ohio, one power plant has already been torn down, another one is getting ready to be torn down, and what's happening to them? They are being boxed up and shipped where? To the dump?
No, China and India.
And Japan. So when these are torn down, they took 20 years to build. Once they're gone, they're gone. And this country is over. Meet this man immediately after. Thank you very much for coming, sir. Thank you.